again, and thank you all for joining. The meeting is being recorded, and there should be one available after this session. My name is Rose Sang. I'll be moderating this evening's conversation around authenticity, confidence, and technical expertise. So that's today's agenda, and we do hope that it will be an engaging, fun-filled evening because Dr. Modupe has promised to give us some of his war stories as he was in the military. So at this juncture, allow me to invite Catherine to give us the opening remarks, and then we can move on to today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Rose. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Always a pleasure to join you during these monthly board talks. I learned so much from each of you, from the questions that you ask. I learned so much from the speakers that we have invited. And so I'm hoping that this evening, you are going to actually take stock of your own journey, your leadership journey. Take stock of those things that are holding you back. Take stock of those things that are propelling you forward so that you can harness them. And those things that are holding you back, that you will do something about them. So indeed, as women on boards, we do love to have these sessions because they help us not only hone our leadership skills, but also network with each other and learn from each other. So I will not spend to this talk and do hope that you will really, really enjoy yourselves. I'm looking forward to it myself. Thank you very much and enjoy the talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for those opening remarks. And so at this juncture, allow me to introduce our first speaker. This is none other than Winnie Njenga, who is the Executive Director of the African Council of Accreditation and Accountability, a Pan-African organization that focuses on accreditation and accountability to enhance public trust. She is a certified professional mediator and a co-founder of TFG Trust that focuses on mentorship and discipleship of young people within family setting and establishing small accountability life groups for them. She's a leadership, governance, and organizational coaching and development consultant. Welcome, Winnie. We're looking forward to hearing from you around this topic on authenticity, confidence, and technical expertise in performance and leadership. So what does accountability look like? What are the myths and truths about authentic leadership? What is the substance of leadership? And why do women struggle with confidence? So Winnie, the floor is yours. We hope to engage and interact with you as you crack on with this exciting topic. Karibu sana, Winnie.
Thank you very much, Rose. It's an absolute pleasure and honor for me to be here this evening and to share a few tidbits as we begin, just to get us going and engaging a lot more. If I can share the screen, I'd be more than glad. Can't I? All right. Okay, there we go. So we'll basically walk through the preview that Rose has spoken to so clearly. And just to begin by laying out a bit of a foundation about leadership, that no legitimate businessman or woman or leader ever got started on the road to permanent success by any other means than of hard, intelligent work coupled with earned credits plus character. And that really sums up the three aspects or elements that we will be looking at today. When you look at character, you're looking at the whole area of authenticity. When you look at intelligent work and credits, you're looking at technical expertise. And so Timothy Dwight was right on spot as we look at what he said with regard to today's conversation. And then a good engineer or architect will tell you how high a building will go by looking at the hole in the ground. A building is as strong as its foundation. And these elements that we're looking at tonight are really foundational elements of leadership. And so our foundation stones will determine how high we climb, and more importantly, how long we will maintain those lofty positions. So what place to begin as we go through this? The heart of leadership, we're told, is not about title or designation, but rather about impact, influence, and inspiration. And that's really the core of authentic leadership. When you put that against the script of what is seen to be as authoritative leadership in comparison to authentic leadership. So these soft foundational pillars for leadership, which we'll be looking at today, just to review again, is authenticity that surrounds character, confidence that is born from a place of value, and then technical expertise that's just about skill, and continually skilling so that we are sufficiently well learned to be able to speak with authority, in addition to authenticity as we look at our subject. So let's just quickly run through authenticity. In looking at authenticity for any leader, you're looking at rethinking the leadership image, and we'll be looking at some contrasts in a bit of a while. How does a leader think, perceive, and recalibrate the way that they seek to intentionally portray themselves before those that they lead? We've said that leadership is about influence. It's about impact. You cannot force submission. You cannot force influence. You cannot force impact. Those are caught. And so when we look at authentic nature or the authentic component or character of a leader, we must rewire the way that leadership has been fashioned to be and rewire it to the innate man or the innate person. Rethinking means recalibrating our mentality towards aspects of understanding, aspects of listening, aspects of compassion in leadership, aspects of humanity and humaneness in leadership. And so beyond vision is the heart and the soul of the people that you are leading. And where is your mind with regard to engaging in compassionate thought processes, engaging in emotional intelligence, really, towards those that you're leading? Where is your mindset at? Is it in accomplishing sets of tasks, or is it in carrying every last footprint with you? Is it in carrying people together, carrying people along, including those that have dissenting views and grossly differing views from you? There are ways in which we can disagree agreeably as leaders and still carry this boat and steer it right. So authentic leadership is about rewiring and rethinking, thinking about the others, thinking about where they are at, thinking about where do you want them to go from where they are, picking them from where they are and bringing them to their best self. That way, Dale Carnegie said that people support a world they help create. And everybody wants to look at what's in it for them. They too are thinking about, how will this benefit me? And so leaders who rewire their leadership image and rewire their leadership thinking to think about the benefit of those that they lead, those that they seek to influence, have a greater propensity towards success in leadership and success in delivering of results through teams as we work through that. And then there is the second aspect of looking at self-awareness, being able to understand yourself, being able to, as a leader, face your demons, if you may. Consistently exposing yourself to vulnerability to a select few that will look at you in the eye and say, this and this and this is one way in which you carry yourself when this and this and this predisposing factors happen. And this is how it affects and this is how it impacts people. And then going back to your inner man and beginning to tame the leader before you seek to tame the led. And so being very self-conscious, being very self-aware in situations, consistently being alive and present to your own internal emotions, actions, reactions, and thought processes, so that you are able to moderate those as you interact with those that you lead, brings out a strong sense of authenticity, so that it's not about my way or the highway. It's not about jumping in to react to what I already feel and how I must express myself right now, but rather reading the mood and understanding the environment and then aligning yourself to that and pronouncing yourself to what is surrounding your environment for greater good. So greater self of sense awareness brings out authentic leadership, knowing your limits, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, knowing where you need a helpful compliment, inviting that helpful compliment and not perceiving it as a competition. There is strength in vulnerability in authentic leadership. The leader does not always know it all. The leader does not always have it together. The leader does not always get it right 100% of the time. The leader will slip. The leader will goof. The leader will fall sometimes. But there is greatness. To err is human, but to recover is divine. To be able to be self-aware and to come out and say, look, guys, this went not to right. And I apologize about this. Can I get help on this and this and this account? Can I get a volunteer? Can I get somebody to help us work through this process? You know, is a way in which an authentic leader communicates that they are aware, they're alive to their own strengths, they are alive to their own challenges and failures, they're aware to the limitations of their areas of knowledge and expertise at times, and therefore inviting and onboarding surrounding capacity creates a sense of peace and settledness around those that you lead, to the extent that there will be, that you can create a clamor for support because of authenticity. The third thing is assessing your values, your likes and dislikes. And from that place of the way that you have rewired your thinking and are carrying people along, and then, you know, open in your self-awareness and inviting them on board, communicate, therefore, values, likes and dislikes. And it will be taken, hopefully, more often than not, from a place of appreciation and respect by those that are led. And therefore, being very clear about value systems, being very clear about what you stand for, being very clear about the lines that are very clear for you and that are not gray areas, communicates authenticity. And then taking action, take action, get support, you know, bringing people on board again, communicates authenticity. The other aspect or component is working on effective communication, learning to communicate every day. Communication will vary as frequently as our teams vary, because the way that you get a message across from one segment of your those that you lead or your work teams to another segment varies. Situations and environments vary. Holding back, communicating a lot, moderating, allowing thoughts to come through are all aspects that a leader, an authentic leader, must take into account as you communicate authenticity. And so these are very quickly just some differences between authentic leaders and bosses. Yeah. So you coach, you run on goodwill, generate enthusiasm, consistently are about the team, working to fix breakdowns and not doing it yourself, but really inviting the team to take corrective action, to take responsibility for this pie and to work through the motions. And showing, show me, tell me, let me is a process of authentic leadership that you display, and then first you tell, and then you show, and then you let, and allow your team to run with that. Giving credit to the team, ask, and ask some more, as contrasted to driving, pushing authority, being me, I, myself, and I, and on and on and on, and taking personal credit. Sometimes for work that has 100% of the time been done by others other than yourself. And so authenticity is fundamentally about trust and creating trust. You can get pretty much just about anything from anyone if they can trust you. And that's the core of authenticity. When we look at confidence, I loved this quote, that confidence comes naturally with success, but success comes only to those that are confident, right? Food for thought. It starts from within, and it starts from a place of self-awareness. And so tagging onto authenticity, knowing who you are, knowing your limitations, your capacity, your strengths, your weaknesses, what you bring to the table, and being very strong about it, being very at ease about it, being very robust and generous with it, then brings out the elements of a sense of confidence in yourself as a leader. So it's from within. It comes from authenticity, because your true you, your true north, cannot be challenged. When it is not authentic, when it is an ape of another, and then you're very conscious about not fumbling, and therefore confidence comes from within. Just looking at the components of confidence, one is personal presence, right? You want to develop a confidence in your presence, being comfortable in your skin, irrespective of who or what might be surrounding you. A regular renewal of your energy and your perspective to things, and the confidence to be able to change your mind when you discover that a previously held position is actually outdated, not entirely true or helpful in a particular situation, and turning that around and custom fitting your communication around that. That personal presence that speaks to your ability to communicate, your energy and the vibe and the oomph and the warmth that you bring into a room, and confidence in your skin are an element to be developed. And that speaks to and develops personal presence. What you want to let go of is doubt in how you contribute, and therefore knowledgeability of your subject. Be well read, be well coached, be well taught, and speak authentically and with confidence and knowledgeably about your subject. Let go of running flat out until you crash, okay? Confidence is about saying, this is as far as I can go for now. I now need to take a break. And letting go of the misnomer that one size fits all. Second aspect or component of confidence is team presence. Team presence, team reliance, defining what to do, and accountability for many results. Being available in your team as a team player. Relying on the energies around the team, relying on the capacities around the team, leveraging, complementing, coaching, sharing on your team, and then in the same vein, allowing people to take responsibility and accountability for delivery. That sense of team presence, that sense of bringing people on board, them knowing that they are appreciated, that they are cheered upon, that they are corrected, that they are coached, that they are reprimanded from a place of goodwill is important. And then, of course, letting go of self-reliance, where your team feels sidelined, and just telling and issuing instructions and taking responsibility for many results. Sharing, team presence communicates, is a very fundamental component that communicates confidence, that you are confident in your team, that you are not threatened in your position as a leader, and that you are happy to let everyone's glow and shine come out. And then organizational presence, looking left and right and diagonally as you lead, having a 360-degree perspective and allowing for your team and those around you to feed into, and letting them know what you appreciate and letting them know what may not work at the present moment and what really goes against the grain of where the common team is leading to. An outside view of your organization. I keep saying that every confident leader must have 3 people, 2, sometimes 3. 1 is their minister for their spiritual well-being. 2 is their therapist for their mental well-being. And 3 is their coach to keep them on track, right? And so having those external people that can speak in brutal honesty, if you may, into your organization, into your leadership, those who give you an external eye view of how you look, creates a sense of confidence and is a critical component of any confident leader. Therefore, an outside view and a big footprint view of your role, looking at your role and consistently expanding the view of your role, creates a sense of greater confidence in your organization and gives you a sense of organizational presence. When you know what the outside world is thinking, saying, doing, and reformatting and realigning to that, when you're able to allow people to think and speak into, and when you are able to expand the role, the footprint of your role. Letting go, of course, of looking up and down as you lead, looking at an inside-out view, what we have to offer you as opposed to what do you need and how do we align, and a small footprint of your role. Then we can move on then to this quick summary that just speaks of confidence as a cycle, looking at the cycle of confidence. Basically, you're able to do these things and keep doing it in a consistent rotary manner and increasing in your self-confidence. So confident leaders exhibit happiness, have better relationships, are motivated, are open to risk, recognize success, think for themselves, and allow all the other components that feed into this cycle to inform how they carry on around this cycle. And then just in winding up and providing a segue for Dr. Modupe to come through is looking at technical expertise. You must be skilled at what it is that you communicate to those that are led. Leadership skills for employees is critical. Not only must you have technical expertise in your subject expertise or in the area that you have cut yourself out as an expert, but you must be looking to skill those that you work with. There are many different skills required in the workplace, and most of them are soft and salient. A lot of them are hardcore technical, but they do not, hardcore technical in the absence of soft and salient, are in themselves just machines and mechanics of leadership. And so active listening is a technical skill that you must employ in communicating or in passing through the technical expertise that you want to give. You want to hear and know where your people are at. You want to know what the gaps in the technical skills are. You want to know how best to plug those, and you want to know how best to guide and coach them. So active listening builds around technical expertise, empathy, flexibility, creativity, reliability, ability to manage human capital towards a desired end. business storytelling. Right now, and especially in this season of COVID, it has become imperative for leaders to be great storytellers. You want to tell your virtual team, who otherwise would be able to get your body language, your vibes, your mood when sitting, you want to be able to still create those pictures, mind pictures for them, and get them to still have a sense of feeling of the organization. And business storytelling is a skill, and I dare say a technical expertise that must be incorporated into leadership. My friend here tells me that my time is up, but I cannot overemphasize the need to be able to skill, and keep up skilling yourself as a leader. Knowledge. The day we stop gaining knowledge is the day we die as leaders. And you do not want to get to the point where you are dead on arrival, where your team knows more than you do, where your team is more skilled than you do on an area for which you are a subject expert. And so thank you very much for this opportunity to just share quick, broad highlights on those aspects of leadership. And I'll turn this back over to Rose. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Winnie. What a way to start off the session by talking about the characteristics of authentic leadership, what confidence means, and how technical expertise blends into it all. Thank you, Winnie, for that session. We shall be coming back to you. I can see the questions are coming in fast and furious. So take a cup of tea, perhaps some water, maybe something a little stronger, because the hard questions are coming after this. So at this juncture, allow me to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Modupe. He has an interesting CV because he has many fasts along this. So Dr. Modupe is a scholar and practitioner of leadership, organization, and management. He's also a leadership trainer, coach, and facilitator who has successfully trained and facilitated workshops in over 10,000 people in various corporates in North America, Europe, and Africa. Some of his former clients include the World Bank Group, United Nations Population Fund, PPG Industries, EcoBank, amongst others. Dr. Modupe is the first and only person from Sierra Leone to ever qualify for, attend, and graduate from the United States Military Academy, West Point. So we should have some interesting stories around his time at the West Point during this presentation. So he's a former military leader with combat experience and served in the Republic of Sierra Leone military forces as an infantry officer in combat during the Civil War and was shot twice in battle. He has a track record of completing the mission and a reputation for developing the people he leads to become better leaders. He is founding dean of the African Leadership University School of Business and now serves as a visiting professor. He's also the founding dean of Cora Coaching Academy based in Rwanda. And listen to this, the only Sierra Leonean with a PhD in leadership. What an honor it is to have you here with us, Dr. Modupe. He will be touching on some of the aspects around authentic leadership. What exactly is it? Does it just mean being yourself? What if you're an arrogant bulldozer? Is authentic leadership just a way to justify your lack of sensitivity within the organization? And can we develop these leadership qualities as we move up the corporate ladder? So to address us on some of these aspects, karibu sana, Dr. Modupe. The platform is yours.
Asante sana, Rose. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to say, first of all, thank you very much to you and to Catherine for organizing these evenings of learning. And thank you to all of the people who have tuned in and are investing their time and talents to hopefully glean something that will help them in their leadership journey. I am a huge proponent of the Women on Boards Network because I believe very strongly and passionately that when Africa taps into all of its human resources, especially from the women in leadership positions, then things get better. And one of the ways in which I have personally benefited from the leadership of women is from the chair of our organization, Breakfast Club Africa, who is an amazing woman by the name of Charity Lumba. And I'm going to share you a few stories about her as well in my talk, and her authenticity and her confidence and her expertise. But I think I'll take us back first to, my early days on leadership. And to set the context, I want to ask each of you a question. What is it that makes you the leader in your team? What is it that makes you the leader in your organization? Winnie shared that, it's not just about the position that you have or the title. It's really about your ability to impact, to influence, and to inspire. I started learning about leadership a lot, consciously at least, when I was at West Point. I joined the Sierra Leone Army in the first quarter of 1990. And I have to confess, I'm not quite sure why I joined the Army. I suspect it was probably a subconscious desire to escape my father's shadow. My parents were both missionaries, Christian missionaries, and they were educators. My father at one time was the principal or vice chancellor of the Nairobi Evangelical Graduate School of Theology, which is known as NEGIST. Today it's called AIU. And in my life, he was larger than life. And I suspect I was probably trying to go and chart my own course somewhere. So I went to the one place that I knew he had, nobody knew his name, which was to the Army. And about 6 months later, I was blessed to win an appointment to study, to become a military officer at the United States Military Academy. 6 months after I left Sierra Leone for America, Sierra Leone fell into a civil war that spilled over from Liberia. Now, I want you to understand the situation at that time. The army before the war in Sierra Leone was largely ceremonial. It was 3,000 people. We used World War II rifles that had no bullets in them. And pretty much the army was only useful for ceremonial duties, marching on Independence Day and things like that, parades. So when the war came, we were grossly underprepared. And, quickly the army needed to beef up its people. So it was beefed up from 3,000 to about 10,000 people. And easily half of that number came from, how shall I put it? Convicts, people who were not the dregs of society. And we basically put weapons in their hands and said, off you go to go and fight these rebels. And when they went and, without much training, to give them, as we called it, morale or courage, the army came up with this brilliant idea that we would actually procure pure alcohol for them and give it to them so that they would drink it, and that way they would sum up some courage. And we even started to give them a little bit of cannabis so that they would have real courage and go out there and fight. This was the state of the army when I returned from West Point in 1994. Soldiers were indisciplined. They didn't know how to shoot straight. Half the time, they would loot from the very people whom they were supposed to protect. Fratricide was common, otherwise known as friendly fire. The officers weren't that much better, because at that time, the Army used to pay in cash. So an officer would go to the headquarters, collect all the money for his unit. And of course, by the time he gets to where he's supposed to pay, some of that money has somehow disappeared into one girlfriend or another concubine's pocket. And then they would start lying to the soldiers, who after a while figured it out and would eventually take their revenge in the midst of the fog of war. So when I came back to Sierra Leone, having learned about leadership, about authenticity, about confidence, about how to shoot, it was clear to me that if I didn't apply the best of leadership, my life would be quite short. I quickly put together a unit of 5 people who were supposed to be what they call my batmen. And their job is generally, every officer had 1 or 2 to shine their shoes, etc. And those were the only people you were guaranteed would move around with you all the time. Because the other thing that the Army used to do was to move people between units. So I asked for 5 of them. And I trained them intensely the first 2 months that I came back. We learned things like how to shoot straight, breathing techniques, fields of fire, night fighting, knife fighting. I taught them everything that I knew about fighting in a war, trench warfare. And they became the people that I would always go into battle with. In addition, when I was assigned a unit, which was typically anywhere from 100 to 150 people, I made it a habit to not steal their rations or their money. Now, this doesn't sound like a really elevated level of leadership, but compared to what was happening around, it actually made me seem like a pretty darn authentic leader. After about 8 months of success in clearing out the rebels in one place to another, on one clear afternoon in January 1995, we were ambushed and I was shot. One of the bullets was largely a flesh wound. It hit my elbow, pretty much damaged my finger, but not a big deal. The other one, though, went through my femoral nerve, which is the nerve that basically holds your quadriceps together, and essentially paralyzed me on the spot. I was stuck in a no man's land between the rebels and my unit because I had been leading from the front. In the midst of the hail of bullets, 2 of my 5 soldiers laid down what they called containing fire, while one other soldier risked his life, ran across the open space to reach where I was and lifted me in a fireman's carry and ran back to safety. The journey wasn't comfortable, by the way. I was bleeding profusely, but luckily, about 3 hours later, I was receiving medical attention. I had weeks, months of recovery time in the hospital and a couple of surgeries. Time that was used by me to ponder on certain things. I thought to myself, why did these guys do this? Why did they risk their lives for me? In an army where it was common for the soldiers to shoot their own officer, Why did they just leave me there? After a couple of weeks, I actually summoned the courage to ask them once when they came to visit. Their answer was brilliant in its simplicity. They said, "But sir, you are our leader. We couldn't leave you there. You haven't done anything wrong to us. It would have been wrong for us to do that." As I contemplated their simple answer, I realized that what I had reaped was the fruit of the seeds that I had sown of leadership. By being honest with them, by being forthright with them, by engendering trust in them, I earned the position of influence on them. By showing them the confidence of moving forward, even in a war, when, quite frankly, I was scared. There were times I nearly peed my pants. I was an inspiration to them because I demonstrated that confidence. And by training them, by making sure that I knew what I was doing and I imparted that, and I kept on making sure that I improved on my skills and theirs, I impacted them and thus earned the position as their leader. So when it comes to being an effective leader, I couldn't agree with Winnie more that authenticity, confidence, and technical expertise are hugely important. Now, I came across this phenomenon again about 2 years ago. We had started Breakfast Club Africa 4 years ago. And Breakfast Club Africa, by the way, is an organization that provides executive coaching and peer learning experiences for leaders. We're on a mission to transform Africa by making access to such decision-making support services the norm rather than the exception for every leader. We started off with a chairperson who is a very well-known person from Ghana, Professor Ade. But about a year and a half into his term, he was appointed by the president of Ghana to a very senior position, and it was clear he said he couldn't continue as our chair. So we had a challenge. We needed to find a chair. At the same time, we also had a board that was about 60% men and 40% women. And 2 years ago, I came across a lady with a rather unassuming name, Charity Chanda Lumpa. And she had been referred to me by a friend who had recommended her as somebody who was an expert on, corporate governance and could actually give a talk. So I spoke with her. And the first thing that struck me about her was her authenticity. When she said, I know about coaching, I've heard, but it's not something, I'm not a coach. It's something I'm hearing about. So, your organization sounds pretty interesting. The first thing she did was to be vulnerable and to be authentic. And over the course of our conversations, I came to realize that this woman was very accomplished. She was a chair of a board of the largest bank in Zambia. She's from Zambia. She had been a board chair of SOS and a couple of other organizations. And she just exuded confidence. So I asked her to join our board. And the interesting thing she said was, she says, well, let me think about it, because I'm not sure I know enough about what you do. And she said, let's, give me 6 months or so. Now, folks, do you know what she did in that 6 months? She went through coach training to become a coach. She equipped herself for the role. And by the time we started talking again, about 6 or 7 months later, not only was I convinced that she should be a member of the board, I was convinced that she should be our chair. And she has led our board with amazing competence. And we have gone through challenging times, but her confidence continues to challenge me to lead in the best way I can. So I share these stories with you to illustrate what Winnie has shared with us, which is that when it comes to leadership, the easy part is recognizing it. The hard part is being aware of the inputs to it. Each of us here is a leader. We have people that we influence. And the level and the success to which we influence them will depend in large part to our authenticity, our ability to be confident and to exude confidence, even when there are times of self-doubt or doubt, and our ability to upskill ourselves so that when we're making decisions, we're making informed decisions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Modupe. You know, they say nothing sticks in your head better than a story. So thank you for storytelling and breaking down the concepts around authentic leadership, competence, and technical expertise by sharing your life story. So asante sana for that. So allow me to request Winnie to put on her video so that we can then get into the plenary session. And the first question is to you, Dr. Modupe. So can one learn authentic leadership? Is it something that can be taught? Or are you sort of born with some of the innate competencies around that?
Thank you, Rose. I have to confess that my perspective on this is influenced not only by research, but also by my faith. I believe that authentic leadership is truly learned, because all of us are born with bad habits. Well, the Bible will say that we're all born sinners, which means we're born liars, cheats, and with everything that makes us inauthentic. But we learn the values of those things. If we're blessed, we're fortunate, we learn them as little children from parents who teach us that these are important values to demonstrate. If we're not as fortunate, we may learn it later on, sometimes with the rod instead of with the carrot. But the key to it is that authenticity is learned, because it is not in our intrinsic nature to show our vulnerability. It is not in our intrinsic nature to be honest about things. It is in our nature to be self-serving, to be selfish. And leadership is about being selfless. And that is a habit or a choice that has to be acquired And again, this is why leadership training, leadership seminars, workshops like this are so important, because we are constantly fighting against a rubber band that is pushing us more towards selfishness, which, by the way, I'm sure comes as no news to anybody here, is why Africa finds itself where it is. I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you. Interesting perspective. Winnie, you talked a lot about self-awareness. So what does that mean for us? And how does one become true to self, especially in situations around the boardroom where, you know, women sometimes try to behave like men? So where do we find that balance, and how do you become true to yourself from a self-awareness?
Self-awareness is about being open and vulnerable to self, listening to yourself. And there's a very interesting overlay between authenticity and the learned art of authenticity, as Modupe has said, and then creating that as a springboard to self-awareness. I want to pick up what Daktari has said, and I know he knows the term Daktari, so I will use that on him. What Daktari has said about authenticity is a sense of becoming, a sense of finding the moral compass of who we should be as human beings, of who of what values we should espouse, of what we should be becoming more of. And so authenticity is about becoming. And so self-awareness is the ability to measure, gauge, align, compare, and contrast what you are doing, what you are experiencing, what you are exhibiting, how you are communicating and relating against this moral compass of what you ought to be becoming, and finding the gap between and therefore moving towards what we ought to be becoming. Authenticity is about becoming more. If you're a person of faith, and I am, becoming more like the person of Jesus Christ. And it's not very difficult to be able to know when I have acted in a discompassionate manner, when I have told an untruth, when I have harbored selfish feelings or feelings of anger or a sense of judgment that is impaired towards somebody else, while being very present and aware to how I ought to be. And so being alive and present, there's a sense in which humanity in and of itself desires to just be. This is just me. You hear people saying, this is just me. This is just how I am. This is how I'm wired. More often than not, when you hear that kind of statement, it is a desire or an attempt to defend wrongdoing, to defend what you know is unbecoming, to defend what you know is probably rude, obnoxious, uncaring, discompassionate, untruthful. More often than not, when we are authentically walking in that which is honoring and compassionate and helpful and lifting, you rarely people saying, that's just me, that's how I am. The tendency for us when we act in ways that are authentic is to remain on the high road of humility. And so when you know that you're trying hard and fast to defend a certain position, the ability to stop and take stock, and everybody has that ability in them if they let themselves. We all have that ability to sit back and think through our actions and ask ourselves whether this was rational. Was it right? Was it fair? Was it just? Is it the right way to go? That's beginning to skill yourself to be to be aware to self, to be present to self.
Sorry, Winnie, I think you're on mute.
Okay. To be sorry about that, to be aware and present to yourself, and then begin to gauge that against what it is that we ought to be becoming. And so a sense of self-awareness is a learned art. Sit, be still, and listen and evaluate. Begin to have the practice of jotting down. I love to journal, jotting down certain things that jumped up in your mind or in your spirit, if you wish, that sat a bit squiff. Jot it down. And in my interaction with Rose, I said this, it felt a bit off. Leave it there. In my interaction with so-and-so, I felt this, I did this, it felt good, you know, and then sit at the end of the day and just evaluate. Walk through those processes. Put yourself in those shoes of the other person, perhaps, whom you reacted to. Ask yourself how you would want to be treated. Ask yourself what would an authentic engagement look like. And then begin to allow yourself to be vulnerable to certain people and accountable to them, to begin to change those ways and ask them to call you out when you err or when you go back to old ways. And so that intentionality about monitoring and evaluating self and behavior is one of the ways in which you begin to create a greater sense of self-awareness. When you do a habit, social scientists tell us that when you practice a habit consistently over a period of time, 21 days, we are told, it becomes, practice a particular action, 21 days, it becomes a habit. When you continue with the habit long enough, it becomes character. It becomes who you are. So if you're intentional enough to invest the time to monitor and evaluate your behaviors, your interactions, your relationships, your sensitivity towards others in almost a studious manner in that way, and contrasting it against what you know ought to be, then you begin to build a greater latitude for awareness to self.
Thank you, Winnie, for that elaboration. And Dr. Modupe, I have two questions for you. One is, the African culture plays a key part insofar as our upbringing. And so sometimes, given that, we struggle being authentic because then there are aspects around vulnerability and a perception of weakness. So how do we overcome that? So that's the first question. And the second question is around confidence. So a lot of the times we find that men seem to be a lot more confident than women, even when they possess similar or equal technical competence in whatever area. What would be your advice around that or comment to that question?
Thank you, Rose. Amazing, insightful questions. Indeed, it is absolutely correct that there are parts of various cultures in Africa, and I'm always careful not to describe the African culture as if it is one culture. I've been blessed to travel to at least 15 different African countries, and I'm acutely aware that cultural norms can be slightly different in certain places, as I have learned, sometimes to my embarrassment, in different places. Now, having said that, there are many cultures in Africa in which there are certain perspectives that are not helpful for achieving the best level of leadership. And certainly one of the proofs of that is where we find ourselves in terms of our human development. And it is one of the challenges that every leader has, because there are few things more difficult than making a choice to go against that which you were taught when you were a child. It acts like an elastic band that holds you. And this is where what Winnie shared is so important, that every leader needs a coach, because it is that person who will support you in thinking through those decisions and going through the thought process of what will this result in? Does this serve the objective I have? Because there are times when if we think through it, we realize actually what we're just, by doing what we were about to do, we're only serving our culture, which is serving the expectations of people who either have left the earth or will soon leave the earth, or are don't know necessarily what is best for them. And so if we as leaders are entrusted with achieving certain objectives, then we have to have the awareness enough to think through and say, does this decision meet that objective? Will it move me closer to it or farther away? And the coach helps you to go through that process, and also helps you to hold yourself accountable to following through with that decision. Because for many of us, we may well know what we're supposed to do, but following through is so hard, especially when we know we're going to face some disapproving looks from people from our hometown or from that we consider family. So yes, it is not easy. That is number one. And this is why all leaders need a coach. All leaders need a coach. Because by ourselves, we cannot get it done. The second point that you made was another one that is near and dear to my heart, although I'm not sure that I am, as they put it, gender qualified to give advice on how to achieve it, which is the fact that, yes, indeed, it is supported by research that men and women exude different levels of confidence, especially in Africa, okay? And some of that traces back to our upbringing, again, and how we are raising girls versus how we're raising boys. So here's my first thing that I want to urge all of us here. Let us start by examining how we are raising our children and what we are teaching them. Little things that we do, like allowing our sons to get away with certain things because boys will be boys, versus telling our daughters that no, you don't do that, and yet you allow your son to get away with it, starts to imprint in children who will then become adults and leaders that there are different standards for men and women, and there are different expectations. And with those different expectations comes different burdens. So yes, that is the situation we have, and I encourage all of us to start by making sure that the leaders we are grooming at home, that we are not consciously or subconsciously reinforcing the very same lack of confidence in those leaders. So when your daughter tells you that she wants to be a space astronaut or she wants to be the president of Kenya, say absolutely. At least if you were going to say yes for your son, say it for your daughter. Now, in terms of for us who fortunately or unfortunately have gone through the child raising period, where you are, what can we do about that confidence? Once again, get a coach. Because we all need help. And have that authentic conversation with that coach so that you can say, this is where I need to improve. I need to be more willing to volunteer myself or to put my hand up for an assignment, which I'm not sure I can do. Because all of my male colleagues are putting their hands up and I know they don't know how to do it. So this is how we change our behaviors and our character and our habits, by repeatedly taking the positive actions as Winnie has shared. But to take those positive actions, I know for myself If they're not second nature, I need help. And my encouragement to everyone here is get a coach. And if you have a coach, tell your coach about your challenge. If it's confidence, say that's what I want to work on. And they will support you in taking positive actions towards doing these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Get a coach to help you work on some of these challenges. Interesting conversation. So we have a question here from Eunice Maranya, who says, authentic leadership, is it always positive or can it be negative? She has noted that there's an increasing tendency for hiding and protecting bad and sometimes dangerous behavior in order to protect individuals and groups. Winnie, what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Rose, and thank you, Eunice, for asking that question. Allow me to just begin by reading out some meanings of authentic, and that will help us in the position that I will take on authentic leadership. If we look at similitudes of the word authentic, you find words such as genuine, real, veritable, sterling, undisputed, lawful, honest to goodness, kosher, Simon pure. Now, when you look at that description, it is abundantly clear that authentic is what is right and what is just. And so authentic leadership cannot be negative. It cannot be negative. If it is negative, it's not authentic. And so moving on to the whole issue of corruption and the whole issue of herd protection of what is negative, if you do that, then you are inauthentic as a leader. An authentic leader will move a group or a people or a person towards what is lawful, what is just, what is right, what is admirable, what is kosher, if you please. And if you are not moving errancy towards truthfulness and justice, then you are an inauthentic leader, period. And so we do have a good, big, huge deficit of authentic leaders in Africa, sadly. And that is why issues like corruption is deeply embedded in society, because we have deeply inauthentic, deeply unjust, deeply selfish, deeply untruthful leaders continually perpetuated in office and therefore embedding corruption. If we had, and I suggest to us tonight, that if we did have an increasing amount of authentic leadership on the continent, and I serve in an organization that's huge on accountability, if we did increase our base or our footprint of authentic leaders in Africa, we would naturally begin the course of the reversal of corruption on the face of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Dr. Modupe, your comments on that before we wrap up the session?
I love the question about, is it always good? When I was a cadet at West Point, we had an honor code, and the honor code said that a cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, nor tolerate those who do. A cadet will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. So there was one of us, young cadet, who asked the question, well, sir, what do I do if, I'm invited to an officer's house and, the officer makes dinner, and the dinner, frankly, wasn't very good, didn't taste well. And after the meal, they're saying, oh, how was your dinner? How did you enjoy it? Should I just say, well, sir, I forced it down my throat, or it tasted like crap. And it was a very good question. And the answer that we shared with them was, we said, first of all, the answer not to give is to say, sir, it tasted wonderful. Okay? Said, no, that's lying. But at the same time, you can be authentic without being offensive. You can be authentic without being hurtful. And it is true that there are times that sometimes, as Winnie mentioned, that we may hide under authenticity in order to hurt people and claim, well, this is the way it is. Her dress was ugly. So the fact is that authentic leadership is always good. At the same time, authentic leadership also recognizes that there are ways to say no that ensure you do not destroy a person's ego or feelings. It doesn't mean that as a leader, you will not have to make tough decisions. But there are ways to make those tough decisions, to communicate them in a way that helps the person in the long run. And when you do that, then there's no question that authentic leadership has occurred. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Modupe, for those comments. As we wind up this interesting session, I'd requested, Winnie, if you could give us your final thoughts, any tips before we can then go into announcing what other initiatives Women on Boards has.
And thank you so much, Rose. And thank you, Dr. Modupe, for reiterating the fact that communication in expressing authenticity and the wisdom, the requisite wisdom that goes with it is absolutely important for any leader. You can say no in several different ways, but still say no nonetheless. And leave those that you have said no to glad that you said no. And so a parting shot for me would be, seek to skill yourself to be your most authentic self. Seek to skill yourself to be your most authentic self. Seek greater vulnerability. Find your safe space. Find your coach and be accountable and be as vulnerable as you can. The more you do, the more you sharpen your propensity towards authenticity. Confidence takes two shades, and especially as women, confidence can be out and loud, and confidence can be silent and steady. Work to know which shade works best for which environment. And then technical skilling, my take is women, skill and read twice as hard as your male colleagues. The reality of the tables we sit around in governance is such that, like Dr. Modupe said, sometimes there's just that one person or those two people that think that simply because you are of a different gender, you probably don't know as much as you should. So seek to skill yourself twice as much. Sharpen your skill and bring quality and value around the table and to the teams that we lead. Those will be my quick, off the top of my head, parting shots. Thank you, Rose.
Thank you, Winnie. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for those bits. Dr. Modupe, your parting shots to the ladies as we wind up the evening.
Thank you very much, Rose. And also thank you very much to my co-panelist, Winnie, for this. I definitely look forward to having more discussions like this with you because I have learned so much. You know, I continue to reflect on the fact that all of us right here on this call are living a charmed life. What do I mean? The opportunity that you have had now to use Zoom, to use internet, to be a part of Women on Boards Network, you are now officially part of the minority of women in Africa. The majority of women in Africa don't have this opportunity. They don't have a Women on Boards network. They don't have a learning environment like this to grow and to sharpen their skills. It's not readily accessible, whether it's because they don't have access to the internet, or it's too expensive, or joining it has other barriers. The reality is that we are the minority here. My challenge to you is let's flip that switch over the next 5 to 10 years. Let's make this group the majority. Let's make it such that peer learning like this, learning from others, becomes the norm rather than the exception. Let's make it such that every leader can have access to a coach. Because when we are able to do that, when the norm in Africa is women like you, rather than the women unlike you, or even leaders like you, when that becomes the norm, this continent will be transformed in a way that none of us will be even able to recognize. And so I just want to say thank you to the organizers and to encourage you that, especially during those times when it seems like putting together a program like this is a slog, to remind you that what you're building is worth building and building well. So thank you to all of you, and especially to you, Rose, for having done a fantastic job of facilitating us.
Thank you very much to both of you for making my work very easy and for sticking to the time and bringing out, the salient points around this interesting topic. I think what I learned today is sharpen your skills, get a coach, and be yourself, because everybody else is taken. Thank you both. So we'll move on to the next agenda, which is speaking to the upcoming events on Women on Boards. We do anticipate to keep you engaged throughout the year. And so we do have the board profiling and personal positioning session that will be held on the 25th and the 28th of October, 2021. So look out for that. Interesting session, getting you ready for board positions as you climb up the corporate ladder. The other event that is exciting and that we'll be launching on the 4th of November is the Women on Board Ambassadors Mentorship Program. I believe communication went out today. We have 5 ambassadors, John Gumi, Flora Mutahi, Patricia Ithao, Dr. Julia Skipnet-Teach, as well as Rita Kavashe, who have been gracious enough to offer their time, their wisdom, to undertake this mentorship program. So please sign up so that then you can be able to learn from the wise and leaders within various corporates. The third event is the 8th annual conference, the Women on Boards 8th annual conference that will be held on the 24th and the 25th of November. I believe communication has gone out as well, but we will be sending out reminders. please sign up. We have a list of guest speakers that will be speaking to different topics that we'll all benefit from. And last but not least, we have the Women on Board Inaugural Awards 2021 that will be held on the 26th of November later this year. As we all know, we had various categories where we all signed up. I know that assessments are going on, conversations are going on behind the scenes, and it will be interesting to see who the winners emerge during the award ceremony on the 26th of November. Interesting events, please plug in. There is space for everybody within Women on Board. So karibuni sana. Dr. Modupe, we will not tire reaching out to you. So who knows, we might just see you at the Women on Boards Award ceremony later on in the year. So karibu. Please allow me, before we break out for the evening, to give the vote of thanks and to say a big thank you to Winnie and Dr. Modupe for taking your time to be with us this evening and to share your thoughts and to be vulnerable as well as we ask the tough questions to you this evening. Thank you for sharing your war stories. And we are glad that, although you did get shot, that you have lived to be able to tell the tale with us this evening. So thank you very much. To the Women on Board leadership, we want to say a big thank you for providing the space and the platform for us to be able to share, for us to give our time and to learn from you as well. So thank you to you. There's always two ladies who work in the background, making sure that communication goes out, that the Zoom sessions are set up and that we are on time. A big thank you to Hannah and to Kantai. Through the leadership of Mrs. Wanga, we say big, big, big thank you. Asante sana. Last but not least, to you ladies for taking the time to be with us this evening, to pose your questions and to always challenge us and pushing the boundaries to ensure that we constantly keep you engaged. So we want to say a very, very big thank you to you all. They say authenticity requires touchstones to remind yourself and to the people around you that you are human. So thank you everybody for attending this session. Look out for the next sessions that will be coming up. God bless, keep safe and keep well. Asante sana. Keep well.